Picture this. You're a young noblewoman in 3rd century Rome, living a life most could only dream of. Marble halls echo beneath your sandals as servants move quietly through your family's grand villa. Golden lamps cast warm light on painted walls, silk curtains ripple in the breeze, and music drifts softly from the garden. Your father is a senator, your family is respected, and your name carries weight in the imperial court. You have wealth, power, and protection. You believe nothing can touch you. Then one afternoon everything changes. A messenger arrives at your villa carrying a sealed scroll marked with the imperial crest. His expression is unreadable, but the seal itself says enough. This is not a casual letter, it's a summons, a direct order from Empress Julia Soaemias, the most powerful woman in the empire. Your mother looks at you with quiet pride. An invitation from the Empress herself must mean you are favoured. Perhaps it's for a cultural gathering, a feast, or a poetry symposium. Why else would the Empress call upon you? You feel a mix of curiosity and excitement as the scroll is opened. The message is formal, elegant, and deceptive. You are cordially invited to participate in the Empress's cultural symposium on feminine virtue and devotion. It sounds harmless, even flattering. Attending such an event could mean new connections, more influence, maybe even a position at court. You prepare carefully, wearing your finest stola, arranging your hair with delicate gold pins, and rehearsing the kind of clever remarks that will make you stand out. You imagine stepping into the palace like the heroines of Roman tales, admired by all. But the moment you arrive, the illusion shatters. Instead of the familiar halls of the imperial palace, you're escorted by Praetorian guards down a quieter, narrower corridor. Their faces are stern. Their hands never leave their weapons. There's no music here, no chatter, no laughter. Only the sound of sandals on stone. Your heartbeat quickens as heavy doors open, revealing a private amphitheater hidden behind the palace. Torchlight flickers across curved walls. The air is thick, almost suffocating. Rows of seating rise like a silent audience, and in the centre a stage waits. Other noblewomen are already gathered. Their expressions are confused, nervous, afraid. Something is wrong. Then she enters. Empress Julia Soaemias appears draped in imperial purple, surrounded by her guards. Her presence is commanding, her smile cold. She surveys the room like a predator studying prey. In a calm, deliberate voice, she announces the true purpose of this cultural symposium. This is not a debate, not a feast, not a discussion. It is a competition, a performance, a spectacle. You have not been invited. You have been chosen. Instead, her voice echoes through the chamber. You're about to become a participant in the most depraved spectacle the Roman Empire has ever staged. The air grows heavier. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Some women step back in shock, others look frozen, as if their bodies understand before their minds can. What you thought would be an evening of elegance is, in truth, the beginning of something far darker. And here's the most disturbing part. This isn't myth. This isn't rumour whispered through the streets. It's all recorded, by Rome's own historians. Contemporary accounts, written by men like Cassius Dio and Herodian, describe what happened behind these closed doors. What you're about to hear is real. This was Rome at the height of its power, and this was the nightmare waiting behind the palace walls. The story you just heard isn't some hidden legend or exaggerated rumour, it's recorded history. Roman historians documented these events in detail, leaving behind accounts that still shock modern scholars. Cassius Dio, a senator and historian who lived through these years, described the empress's activities with chilling clarity. Herodian, another contemporary writer, confirmed the scale and cruelty of what happened. Even the controversial but invaluable Historia Augusta contains references to these so-called cultural symposiums. These weren't whispers in the marketplace or gossip among servants. These were official records, the kind written to preserve imperial history for future generations. When Roman historians decided to include something this scandalous, you know it shook the foundations of their world. Archaeological evidence supports their words. Excavations on the Palatine Hill, the heart of imperial power, have uncovered private amphitheater spaces hidden within palace structures. These aren't grand public arenas like the Colosseum. They're smaller, enclosed, and designed for select audiences. Stone benches are arranged in tight semicircles, and underground chambers connect to the main floor through discrete passageways. The architecture matches the descriptions left by ancient historians almost perfectly. These were not places of art or debate. They were stages, built for control, humiliation and spectacle. The scale of this system is staggering. This wasn't a single night of cruelty or a handful of victims. For nearly 3 years, this machinery of exploitation operated across the empire. Hundreds of noble families, the most powerful in Rome, were drawn into this web. Some participated out of fear, others because they had no choice. Refusal meant disgrace, economic ruin, or worse. The Empress's reach extended from the Palatine Hill to the provinces, turning personal lives into imperial entertainment. And if you think this story couldn't get more twisted, the rabbit hole of imperial depravity goes much deeper. What began as a hidden spectacle inside palace walls soon grew into a carefully organised system that touched nearly every corner of Roman high society. The deeper you look, the more you realise this wasn't just scandal, it was strategy. A calculated, terrifying method of control that reshaped Roman aristocratic life itself. One of the clearest examples of how this system expanded its grip is the story of Julia Soaemias. She was the wife of a respected senator, known for her sharp mind and strong sense of honour. When her summons arrived, she refused to participate. At first, it seemed like a simple act of defiance, the kind that might be quietly ignored. But Julia Soaemias didn't tolerate refusal. Within weeks, Claudia's husband lost his political appointments. His name vanished from the lists of public responsibilities, and their family's grain imports were suddenly cut off. In Rome, this was no small punishment. Grain wasn't just food, it was power. A family cut off from grain faced financial collapse, public humiliation, and social death. Faced with the ruin of her family's position and survival, Claudia was forced to comply. Her resistance lasted only as long as her household could endure starvation and isolation. Claudia's case wasn't unique, it was a warning. Across Rome, noble families watched what happened to her and understood the message. Compliance wasn't optional. The Empress had built a system that reached into every corner of elite life. The Praetorian Guard didn't just protect the imperial family anymore, they were watching the aristocracy. Their presence at private villas, public baths, and even family gatherings reminded everyone that refusal carried consequences. No door was truly closed, no conversation truly private. Economic pressure became one of Julia's sharpest weapons. Families that cooperated received generous tax breaks, lucrative trade contracts, and fast-tracked appointments in government. Those who hesitated saw their trade agreements torn up, their ships delayed, their grain stores withheld. Overnight, loyal families became rich and influential, while the disobedient were pushed to the edge of collapse. The message was clear: loyalty brought prosperity, resistance brought ruin. As this system hardened in Rome, it didn't stay contained within the palace walls. Representatives loyal to Julia exported the model to other major cities: Alexandria, Antioch, Carthage. At first, these events were presented as patriotic celebrations of Roman virtue. Local elites were told that participation was a way to demonstrate their loyalty to the empire and gain favour at court. Over time, what began as voluntary cultural events turned into requirements for maintaining political access. By the third stage, participation wasn't questioned at all. It was simply expected behaviour for any woman who wanted to secure her family's place within the imperial network. The psychological impact was devastating. Contemporary historians noted a rise in suicides among noble families, particularly among young women summoned to the events. Others developed sudden, mysterious illnesses, symptoms that modern historians often interpret as trauma responses. Fear spread like smoke through the upper classes. Mothers whispered warnings to their daughters, yet they also prepared them for the inevitable. Court society was reshaped by this terror. An entire generation of Roman women grew up knowing that their social survival depended on submission to a system they could neither control nor escape. This wasn't just cruelty, it was strategic domination, spreading from the heart of Rome to the farthest provinces, binding the empire with fear. Julia Soaemias didn't just build a system, she perfected its control. She understood the aristocracy better than anyone, and she knew that power in Rome could be maintained through a careful balance of rewards and punishments. Families who cooperated with her received tax breaks, lucrative trade agreements, and privileged access to the imperial court. Their sons were promoted quickly, their estates flourished, and their names were spoken with respect. Meanwhile, those who hesitated or refused were crushed through economic warfare. Trade licenses were revoked, shipping routes were delayed, grain deliveries were cut, and tax collectors suddenly appeared with impossible demands. One by one, powerful families realized that the choice wasn't between honor and shame, it was between survival and destruction. But not everyone accepted this quietly. One of the few men who dared to stand against Julia was Senator Marcus Aurelius Saeus. He was well connected, respected, and believed that the imperial court could still be reasoned with. When the scale of Julia's exploitation became clear, Marcus began to gather support from other senators. He drafted a formal complaint intending to present it to the emperor himself. It was a dangerous move, but he believed that open resistance could inspire others. Before his petition reached the palace, Marcus vanished during a routine trip to his country estate. His body was never found. His allies were left with silence and fear. No one needed to explain what had happened. The message was obvious. Resistance would not be tolerated. Julia's genius, however, wasn't just in punishing opponents. She built a blackmail system so comprehensive that it tied the entire aristocracy to her. During the competitions, secret scribes and observers recorded everything: who participated willingly, who resisted at first, what acts each woman performed, and how far they were willing to go to protect their families. These records were organized, archived, and weaponized. Any woman or family who considered opposing Julia knew that their most humiliating secrets could be made public or used against them at any time. The Empress didn't just threaten their wealth or status, she threatened their names, their legacies, their children's futures. Over time, this blackmail turned victims into enforcers. Families who had once suffered under the system began using their knowledge of others' participation to protect themselves. They reported on each other, exposed rivals, and maintained the system to keep their own secrets safe. What began as a tool of imperial power evolved into a self-perpetuating machine of fear and control. Even if Julia had done nothing, the aristocracy itself was now invested in keeping the structure intact. Everyone had something to lose. Everyone was trapped. This is what made her system so chilling. It wasn't just enforced from above, it was woven into the social fabric of Rome's elite. By the end, Julia didn't need to raise her voice or draw her sword. The people she had exploited were now the ones making sure no one escaped. This was power at its darkest: quiet, invisible, and absolute. Julia Soaemias believed her power was unshakable, but her ambition pushed the empire too far. After years of controlling Rome's aristocracy through fear, blackmail, and economic pressure, she made a fatal decision. She expanded the competitions to include foreign noblewomen, daughters of kings, princesses from allied kingdoms, women whose families held power beyond Rome's borders. It was a calculated move to show dominance, but it backfired spectacularly. What had been a hidden scandal inside the imperial court suddenly became an international humiliation. The turning point came when King Artaxias of Armenia learned what would be expected of his daughter if she joined the Roman court. Horrified, he immediately withdrew from a planned marriage alliance with the imperial family. Word spread quickly across the region. Germanic leaders, Parthian nobles, and other allied rulers followed Armenia's lead. They refused to send their daughters into what they now understood was not a royal court, but a place of degradation and control. These were not minor political shifts. In the Roman world, marriage alliances were military alliances. When foreign leaders began withdrawing their daughters, they were also withdrawing their soldiers, their loyalty, and their support. The empire's diplomatic network started to unravel. What had been Julia's private mechanism of power now threatened Rome's stability itself. Armies that had once stood ready to defend the empire began to hesitate. Kingdoms that had been bound to Rome through generations of strategic marriages questioned their loyalties. Internally, senators grew restless. They had watched Julia crush opposition for years, but now her actions were endangering the empire's survival. Even the Praetorian Guard, long her enforcers, began to question their allegiance. The very people she had manipulated were beginning to turn. Pressure mounted from every direction. The aristocracy whispered behind closed doors. Senators weighed their options. Praetorian commanders calculated their chances. Even some of Julia's former victims, now older and more politically powerful, saw an opportunity to bring down the system that had trapped them. In early 222 CE, these groups moved together. A faction of praetorians, senators, and disillusioned elites launched a coordinated coup. It was swift and brutal. Julia Soaemias and her son, Emperor Elagabalus, were assassinated within a single day. The woman who had once controlled Rome through whispers, fear, and humiliation was overthrown not by foreign armies, but by the very people she had subjugated. The system she built collapsed from the inside. It was as if the monster she had created turned and devoured its creator. In the chaos that followed, the imperial court scrambled to erase traces of her policies, but the damage was already done. The empire had been shaken to its core by a system of exploitation that had spiraled far beyond its creator's control. Her fall was dramatic, violent, and absolute, a reminder that even the most terrifying structures of power can crack when those inside it finally decide to fight back. Looking back on this dark chapter of Roman history, it's hard not to see echoes that stretch far beyond the ancient world. Julia Soaemias built her power using methods that feel disturbingly familiar. She isolated her targets, cutting them off from support so they couldn't unite against her. She used economic coercion to reward loyalty and punish defiance, making survival itself dependent on obedience. She wielded shame like a weapon, collecting secrets and turning them into tools of control, and she hid everything behind layers of bureaucracy, dressing brutality in the language of culture, tradition, and imperial order. These were not random acts of cruelty. They were deliberate mechanisms, timeless strategies that those in power have used again and again throughout history. We often like to think that the past was a distant, alien place, but the patterns are clear: isolation, economic pressure, social humiliation, bureaucratic control. Whether in ancient Rome, medieval courts, or modern institutions, the tactics don't change, only the faces and names do. Power structures that rely on fear and control have always found ways to survive by adapting their methods, and unless we recognize these patterns, they continue to echo through time. But beyond the politics and strategies, there's something far more human at the center of this story. Hundreds of Roman noblewomen lived through this nightmare. Most of their names were never recorded. They were daughters, wives, mothers, people who faced impossible choices in a system designed to break them. Many suffered in silence. Some resisted until they couldn't anymore, and others took their own lives rather than submit. History remembers the empress who created the system, but it forgets the women who endured it. Their stories were buried under official records, erased by the same power that exploited them. So, I want to turn this question to you. What other abuses of power do you think have been softened, sanitized, or ignored by traditional history? Where else do you see these same patterns playing out, hidden behind respectable language and official structures? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this discussion thoughtful and respectful to those who suffered. If you found this deep dive into Rome's darkest corridors valuable, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way, you won't miss future investigations that uncover the stories history tried to hide. There are so many more chapters to explore, stories that challenge what we think we know about the past. Because in the end, this story isn't just about Rome, it's about power itself. Power corrupts, but absolute power creates monsters,